Hey guys, welcome back to RMA Garage. I'm Mark and I'm glad you joined us for another episode. Today we are going to be inspecting the fork seals on my son's YZ250FX 2015. Now I say inspecting because they're not leaking, but we're doing year-end cleaning and I want to make sure that everything's good and that, inspect the parts, inspect the bushings. If one side's one way, the other side's going to be probably the other way. So we're going to check one side, but I also want to do a video on how to do the fork seal replacement because there's a lot of videos out there that take a lot of things for granted, but we're going to be doing the replacement and the inspection by the book. We're going to go through each page so you guys can use this as a future reference for if you have your fork seals leak or you need to replace them, that you'll be able to reference this video in the future. So the next thing I want to show you are the tools that we're going to be using. We have a fork seal driver from Tusk. We've got the bullet to slide the seal over top of the end of the fork. We got some calipers to take some readings. I've got oil. This is going to be Bel-Ray 5-weight, which is what we've always used. Maxima suspension clean. I've got a beaker here for measuring out the fluids for the fork. I also have a measuring rod. The directions call for a fluid amount, but they're also call for a measurement. So we're going to do it both ways just to double check. We have a special tool for taking the top cap off of the fork, and then this is a special spacer for taking the bottom of the fork off as well. You're going to need a torque wrench, ratchet, couple of wrenches, screwdriver, pick, breaker bar in case the top is really hard to get off. And then this is another specialty tool made by Tusk. This takes the cap off the top of the fork because this is a dual chamber, and this gets the cap off of that inner chamber. So you're obviously going to need one of those as well. So when doing this for the very first time, specialty tools include fork seal driver, the top cap remover, the fork cap remover, and I like this. This probably is, maybe you need it, maybe you don't, but this saves the fork seals. The rest of this stuff is general tools that you have in your garage. I like to use genuine OEM fork seals. So we're going to use Yamaha. If we do need to replace them, I'm going to use Yamaha. That's what I've always done in the past. So really not a lot of investment if you want to do the fork seals yourself. This is probably, $40–50. But we're going to be going over everything, hopefully step by step, and we'll get this done. All right, so let's get to it. All right, so the first thing we want to do is take the fork off. Well, I guess one of the legs off. And what we're going to do is we're going to have to take this, this cap off, and there's a trick that I'm going to show you, but the first thing we need to do is loosen up these top bolts. We'll do that first. Okay, and they're obviously, we can make sure that they're both loose. So they're both loose. Now you're going to keep the tension on these bolts. Okay. Now we're going to want to put this cap on. And doing a little preview here, we've got our fork guard clamp is in the way. Now if you guys are familiar with these, they use hex head bolts. And you can see these are already starting to rust a little bit. So in order to loosen this clamp and get it in the exact same place is going to be tough. So what I've decided to do is just loosen the handlebars enough so I can get underneath. And this is, it's going to be a little floppy, but we'll deal with it. All right, already giving us some good space there. All right, so that should get us under it. There you go. Now the reason why we loosen these bolts is as they clamp onto this top tube, you can't get this cap off when these bolts were clamped down. So, okay, so the best way I found to do this is that you're going to be loosening counterclockwise, so you already want the handlebars to be locked, so you're not kind of fighting that. Okay, so I guess the easiest way for me to do this would be to stand on this side and see if we can loosen these. Now these have been off before. Okay. Now if yours does not come off, okay, I want to show you guys, you can use a breaker bar, okay? And with this tusk wrench, you can slide that breaker bar in there and you can actually get a little bit more leverage here, okay? So with ours being off several times already, it was able to be broken loose. But if it's never been done before, it may be tight in there, you can use a breaker bar to loosen it up, okay? Now that is as far as we're going, okay? Because we obviously don't want the oil to leak out, but it's easier to break this top cap off with the fork already clamped in to the bottom clamp. Okay, so now we're ready to undo the bottom here. Now, it's very important that you don't assume that these are going to stay, because if I loosen this whole thing could come sliding out if this is a loose connection. My WR, it's a tight connection, and you actually have to pry the clamp open a little bit, but you just never know until you loosen the bolts and find out. Okay, to make sure they always have to be, you don't want them touching because they will still be engaging. Okay, now this one's going to slide right out. And I try and be as careful as possible because I don't want to mar this beautiful finish. And once you get past the flat spot here, it will come out real easy. Okay, so that's what it takes. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is inspect everything to make sure that there's nothing broken and that everything looks good. And what we want to do is we want to clean the leg here. Now, if this had been just taken off the bike and the bike hadn't been cleaned, I'm going to clean all this dirt off here, and I'm also going to clean the bottom of the fork. Now this actually needs to be removed, and I will take this to the wash sink, and we're going to take all the dirt and gunk out of here, because if we try and loosen that with the dirt, it will get inside, and that's just more cleaning that we don't want to do. We don't want to introduce any dirt into the fork leg. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, as you guys can see, all the cleaning that we did, the inside of that is nice and clean, so when we go to remove that, it's not going to be a problem, okay? All right, so we'll come over to the drain pan here, and what we're going to do is we're going to open this up, and as you can see, we loosened it up on the bike, and if this would have been tight, holding this tube on the bench, okay, so now we're going to tip this and we're going to drain the oil out. Now We'll let this drain just for a little bit. It doesn't need to drain for 5-10 minutes. That's going to be a little bit further down in the directions, but we're going to basically just get most of the oil out, and that should be good. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to actually screw this back on. Okay, just so the oil doesn't drain out. Now we're going to focus on the top part. Now the next part is going to be taking this off. And so this here is going to be, this is going to be a number 17. Okay. Now, all right, so one tip for taking this off is having the axle. And I believe this is that, okay? So what you can do is you can use the axle on the bottom here as leverage to get this cap off. Oh, I think we may need to use the breaker bar. All right, so that didn't work. We're gonna go with the bigger guns. Okay, now I'm going to do another little trick. Since this is really tight, you can put the fork with the axle inside. We're going to give ourselves more leverage, and there we go. So there's your little trick. If this is really tight like ours was, we were able to use, we're able to use the table and the axle for leverage, okay? So now we'll just set this aside. Okay, now we're going to need to stand this back up. We're going to completely loosen this. All right, so there's a little bit of dirt. And okay, so now it's completely loose. We're going to revisit the tool, and we're also going to use the axle again. And this again helps us with leverage. What we have to do is we have to take this top cap off. What we do is, there we go. It was just a little stuck. So what we're going to do is we're going to push that down, and there's two little flat spots. There we go. So now we've allowed this to stick out, and this little groove in here has allowed us to hold that open. All right, so I do see some dirt here. Before we go any further, let's knock that off so we don't continue on with the dirt. There we go. Just wipe that off a little bit. That's clean. Okay. How's that look? That looks good now. And if I'm not mistaken, did I grab the right wrench? A 15 maybe? A 15, yes. So these two little grooves in here, it's a number 15. You're going to put a wrench on that. And this cap should not be very tight. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to remove this. We're going to set that aside. So the top cap is off. We're going to remove the dampening tube, and we're going to want to be very extra careful with that. Now we can take that off, take the axle off, and there's going to be some oil that's still going to spill out of here. So you're going to want to turn this over, keep it over the pan. And now we're going to take the top off again, and this will allow us to take the inert dampening tube out. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to set that like so. Shouldn't fall. Okay, now what we want to do is take the spring out, which is going to extract itself. Okay. Okay, so that's going to drain. Now everything is going to have a chance to drain. Now prop this up the best way you guys can. We're going to let this drain for about 10 minutes and then we'll continue on. All right, so it's drained for a little bit. So now what we can do is focus on taking the actual reason for this video, and that's the fork seal. So we're finally getting to it. All right, so the next thing we need to do is take off the dust seal, and I'm using a small screwdriver, and I'm ever so slightly wiggling this into place, not doing my best not to mar the finish on the fork. Okay, so we're going to slide that back, and now we're going to use our pick, and there is a snap ring in here which is really hard to see. And what the pick does is grabs just the right spot, and I'll show you guys. There we go. So what we were grabbing onto was this little divot, this little bump out right there. We were able to get that pick in there and then pry it out. Okay, so we'll slide that down. Okay, now we're at the fork seal is the very next thing. Now in order to get this off, you're going to have to be a little tough on the fork here. It sounds like, it sounds worse than it is. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find out where it bottoms out. So that's where it bottoms out. And we're going to give a couple of hard yanks on this and it should pop right out. All right. It always makes me nervous to do that, but nevertheless, that's what it takes. All right, so the first thing you always want to do is check the order of what you have here and the orientation, just to make sure that you don't forget. Now we're doing this video for your sake, but again, you always want to make sure that you pay attention to this, okay? All right, so the first thing we want to do is take off this bushing. And what you do is you put the screwdriver in and you turn it to open it, and while pushing on the back, it pops right out. Now this should slide off. All right, so the one thing I will tell you is that your hands will be oily until you're finished. Okay, so that we take off. This one obviously just slides. This is the part that actually gets clamped into the tube. Okay, so now you have the washer. Washer does not have a front or a back, so basic. Okay, now the fork seal, being that we're inspecting and possibly not replacing, you have to be careful when you take this off because there is a lip. Okay, this lip is really, really sharp. Okay, not sharp like a knife, but enough that if you were just to yank the seal off, it could rip it. So what we want to do is you slide it down into this raceway. Okay, so it's a little loose. So what I do is I just pick up, I go around the edges of it, and I basically try and just pry up. I'm trying to do this with two hands here. There we go. You get it started, and you ever so slightly pull up. There we go. Nice and easy. I've seen guys just rip these things off. I guess you can if you're willing to replace them or already going to replace them. But now you will see the orientation of this seal. Clean it off just a little bit. You can see that the sharp edge there is what faces down. Now, some of this is could be an older seal, could be a newer seal. Some of the older ones had a spring on the inside. This one does not. Okay, so there is a spring inside the back, inside here, but the part that faces down the leg is kind of the sharp edge right there, and that's what we want to do it. Also, there's words around here. I always put words down. Okay, so now as let me clean this off just a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look to see if there's any tears. Okay, so I'm going to look to see if there's any bumps or tears in this top part. I'm going to go around, basically putting a glare on it with the light, and that all looks really good. Is it rubbery? It's still flexible. It's not dry rotted. It can bend very easily. It's still pretty stiff. So this seal is really stiff. It's not compromised in any way, shape, or form. So I think we're going to forego replacing these, being that they're probably only a year old and the time on this bike really isn't that much. Okay. Now the washer, little spacer here, that one's pretty good. Now if you notice these bushings here, I've been told that if the bushing itself is bright brass color, so you see how it's nice and shiny here, looks like copper color, but this is the part that slides. So as you can see, this was here, all right, and this slides up and down. If this was nice and shiny, that means it would be worn out. On the other hand, this one actually slides inside, because this one goes over top. So this part here gets jammed in the upper tube, but then this is the slide part, and as you can see, it's the same color. So these bushings are in great shape. So we will not need to replace any of these parts. We would just have to clean them up and put them back. All right, so the spring itself, it looks in good shape. This really doesn't get damaged unless you really yank on it too hard when you're taking it off, and that's good. And then we have the dust seal. Now the dust seal doesn't fit as tight as the actual seal itself, so ever so slightly you can get it out over that lip and no damage at all. Now this usually gets really dirty, so yeah, there's dirt that's caked underneath here, so we will clean these up real good. Yeah, and that's in good shape. The top of it is still pretty rubbery. The spring's in good shape. Everything looks good. So we're just going to spend the time to clean. Okay, so the next thing we're going to start doing is cleaning the tubes with suspension clean. And I use Maxima suspension clean. It's great stuff. And quite honestly, I love the smell of it. So it's not offensive in any way. But the first thing we're going to do here is take this little snap ring off. And this is the fork guard. This actually protects the fork from the fork guards as they slide up and down. So, and this is a great time to do this. As you can see, it's pretty dirty, so we're going to get to that in a minute. So what I normally do first is I'll spray inside this is where the one of the bushings slide in. So this bottom race here is where that bushing goes. So we want to spray this channel, and as this spray, it is actually coating the inside of the tube and heading its way down into the pan. Okay, so we got a little bit of that. So now it's going down, and while that is still wet, we're going to well, this is a little trick that I have. I'm sure people have used it, but I take a piece of paper towel and I wad it up, and I take a wooden dowel rod and I will push it all the way down through. And if I'm good enough, maybe it won't hit the pan and I can pull it off with my hands. There it is. I can use it a couple of times if it doesn't hit the oil. So there's a little bit of dirt in there, but not a whole lot. So let's try that again. We'll do a little bit more. Okay, coated that. Shove that back in. Use our dowel rod. And that looks clean. Now, I don't know if the camera guy can catch that, but it's really nice and smooth in there. Okay, so with the paper towel not being too bad, we're gonna wet it a little bit, and then the channel here, there's a little channel in there where the snap ring gets put in. That's that little channel. That always has dirt in it. So we're gonna clean that out. See right in there, there's the channel. It gets a little dirty in there as I spin it. So that's what we're cleaning out now. Yeah, that's looking better. We'll hit it with a little bit of cleaner. A little bit of stubbornness there. Now this suspension clean also is kind of like contact cleaner. It evaporates out pretty quick. It doesn't, it's not like oil. It dries really clear, really quick. We'll run this through one last time. And the reason why I use a wood dowel is because there's no chance of it to scratch the inside of the fork tube. Okay, so that is 100% clean. Okay, so we'll set that on the bench. And now I'm basically just going to go through the other parts here and and you don't have to use suspension clean on all of this, but it's what I use. You can use other cleaners. I do use suspension clean on the bushings, on the tube, and on the actual seals themselves because it won't harm it. I think our paper towel was dying. Let's get another one. And again, this is just a good time to inspect. Make sure that it's nice and round, no issues. So that one's good. We've got the next one here. As you can see also too, while I do this, keeping the oil pan underneath is so important because oil drips. The first time I did this, it was an oily mess. I had oil all over the garage. All right, so that one looks good. We'll do the fork seal. This is all looking pretty good. Oh yeah, no dirt. Okay, so yeah, that all looks really good. Nice and clean and no tears anywhere along the leading edge of that. Okay, and the last thing would be the dust seal. And this one we may need to grab a couple of Q-tips to get in the little nooks and crannies. I think maybe we got it. I always like to show the cleaning because, you know, when people watch, they learn by looking. I don't like videos that show, okay, now we're going to clean it. Okay, it's all clean. Sometimes that's a learning process that you don't want to overlook. All right, so this is nice and clean in here. A little bit of dirt on those leading edges right there. Let me see if I can grab those. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, so that's all nice and clean, and we'll bang it here, a little bit stuck in there. All right, so that's all nice and clean, ready to be installed. And we got the washer here. Washer doesn't really need any cleaner. And that, again, I look just to make sure that it's nice and shiny. There's no hiccups in any way, shape, or form, because now's the time. This is the easiest way to inspect this. Okay, so that's great. And the one last thing is going to be the separate tube. There's the bottom tube. Okay. There's definitely a lot of dirt stuck in that cap, so we're going to be careful that we don't reintroduce that dirt elsewhere. In fact, we're going to angle this down a little bit. See if we can get all that dirt out of there. Yep, it's coming out. All right, so that's getting clean. Still a little bit of dirt in there. We're going to use the pick, kind of get into that. I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but there's dirt that's just down in that little groove. And I know I get a little crazy, but you know, you might as well, if we're doing this, you might as well get it all. There we go. That all fell out. Me. Okay, let's see how well we did. Better. Yeah, that's definitely better. So that's pretty nice. That's pretty clean right there. Get some of the outside here. Okay, so now to do the inside, it's actually kind of a strange thing. I've got a paper towel here, And what we're going to do is we're going to run some cleaner down in here. All right, it's running good. So we're going to stick that in nice and tight. While it's still wet, we're going to put it down. Okay, but of course the hole on the bottom is too small. So we push it back out. I know it's not the best way, but it at least gets the dirt out. Most of it anyway. Let's see. Oh wow, look at that. That was a bit dirty. So we're going to get a new towel. Let's do a different one here. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that again and see what we get. Oh, that one slid in way easier. There we go. That's definitely better. I can see it looks pretty good. So I think we got it all nice and clean. All right, perfect. Okay, so everything on the bench is clean at this point. We gotta maybe clean this cap off before we put it on. But everything else is clean. So now we need to focus our attention to the inner damper tube. We're gonna take it apart, clean it, and start the assembly process. All right, so we have the damper tube. The first thing that we wanna do is take the cap off and take out the inner valving, I guess, or spring. Now this is the special tool that we bought from Rocky Mountain ATV. And I want to show you guys, can you see how this is more or less a gold color, but on the flats it's kind of a silver color, is because when I got mine from Tusk, it would not fit down into this cap. I had to beat it in a couple of times and it was horrible. So what I did was I spent the time with a belt sander and I sanded these flats down so I could get them into here. So I'll leave a link in the description below on where you can purchase this, but I'll also do a couple of different equivalents. I like Rocky Mountain Tusk brand, but that one there left me wanting a little bit. So probably a bad run, or maybe the coating was a little thicker. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our tool again. This here is a number, I believe it is a number 19, so on our tool. All right, so now we're gonna hopefully break this loose. Now there is an O-ring in here, which is gonna make it just a little bit difficult to get. There we go, it's starting to go now. Still pretty tight. Okay, so I don't want this thing falling out of my hands. So let me see if I can take this off. Oh yeah. Now this thing is spring loaded in here. I'm just warning you, you want to push down. There we go. Just didn't know how much it was going. Okay, so now there we go. And now you know why I'm doing this over the pan. Because there is a ton of oil in all of this. Okay. So we'll let that drain for a little bit. if I can prevent it from not falling in. And I have a rag here, hopefully not to get my shop floor dirty. Okay, there we go. Lots of oil coming out. Now I'm going to pump this rod up and down. And as I do, oil is going to come out of the inner workings of this thing, which I'm not too intimately familiar with. There we go. So now, probably let this drain for a little bit. And so far, I think I'm giving myself a B+ for oil on the floor. I'm actually doing quite a good job of keeping it in the pan. It wasn't always this easy and this good in the beginning. Okay, so let's just see if we can at least lean this over and let that drain for a little bit. My tool is still stuck in the end, so it still is tighter than I would like, but at least I was able to get it in without banging it. This should come out. We'll get it out. Or maybe we won't. Maybe we'll just leave it in there until we're ready to install. All right. Wonderful suspension clean. Okay. Now they say to check all the O-rings here to make sure that they're not torn, they're still rubbery, that everything looks good. And in a future video, I'm going to show you that I had my forks actually were worked on by a professional. I had them tuned to my weight and size. And when he did my fork, he didn't replace these either because they were in good shape. So we will not have to replace these because they are all in really good shape and clean at the moment. Okay, so that valve is good. No cracks, no issues, no problems. Everything looks good. Okay, so we'll set that aside. We still have to get that tool out of the top. All right, so here's the fun part. This has always been in a bath of oil. Now, one thing you guys have noticed, it really hasn't been that dirty, and it's not going to be terribly dirty. It's basically just covered in oil, and we're just getting the old oil off and getting it ready for new stuff. Okay, so now what we'll do, turn this right side up. We don't spill oil on everything. And that is clean. Everything is really clean. Okay, and the last part is going to be cleaning out the inside of this. We are not going to shove a rag down in there because there's no way to get it out. There is a dampening tube in there, but it does not go all the way up. So we're basically just going to spray it, shove the rag down in there as far as we can, go around in a circle, keep your fingers crossed, pull it out, and there really isn't a whole lot of dirt in there. Okay, so we'll pour out, and that is suspension clean. And again, this stuff evaporates very quickly once it, thins out. So you don't have to worry about it staying in there and affecting things. Okay. All right, that is clean. So as far as this video goes, I believe that every part of the suspension other than the spring has been cleaned and worked on and looks good. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to start, double check everything, and then we're going to start the assembly. We're going to start filling the oil and start going by the book. Now I've been going by the book for the most part, and I may give little cues along the way here, but we've really done everything by Yamaha's instructions, taking it apart, cleaning it, and doing whatever. But now we're going to get really specific with the assembly. That's why we have calipers. That's why we have the measuring tools that we're going to introduce, and we're going to make sure that we put this back together spec.